Kurt Angle went from being an Olympic gold medal winner in amateur wrestling to a WWE legend, and nobody else in the history of pro wrestling can say that. In November 1999, he burst onto the WWF roster and ended up having one of the most successful debut years ever. Angle took to pro wrestling like a duck to water. Within just 8 months, he was already being accepted as a main event player in the Federation. Even more impressive when you consider the huge amount of competition he had at the time. The main event scene in the WWF was very crowded indeed in the year 2000, and yet Kurt Angle had an almost flawless debut year. Let's go back to 1996 in Atlanta, Georgia, and the stage of the Summer Olympics. Angle stepped onto the mat with a broken neck, that's 2 herniated discs and a cracked vertebra to be precise. It was an intense contest that came down to a judge's decision. They went in favour of Angle, who despite the odds became a real-life Olympic hero. Vince McMahon was watching on as Angle received his gold medal. McMahon knew what real toughness looked like. McMahon was excited at the idea of presenting a genuine, bona fide Olympic gold medal winner, and so he offered Angle a 10-year, multi-million-dollar contract right there and then. Negotiations between Angle and the Federation quickly fell apart when Angle insisted that he would never be booked to lose a match. McMahon just couldn't make that promise, and so Angle declined to sign the contract. To Angle, the WWF was a sham anyway. He didn't understand how it worked, and to him it was almost an insult to his sport. An unexpected visit to ECW at the end of 1996 didn't help Angle's perception of pro wrestling either. Shane Douglas and Angle shared a mutual friend, and he managed to convince Angle to come down to an ECW show. Angle was curious, and so he showed up to the ECW event where he was introduced by Joey Styles. As he walked down to the ring, he slapped the hands of the fans and was even on the receiving end of a heel promo by Taz. Angle seemed to be going with the flow on the show, and it could have been a case of Paul Heyman hiring Angle as some kind of on-screen personality down the line. But then things took a dark turn on the show as the Sandman was infamously crucified. This segment went down in ECW history as one of the most offensive things they ever did. It ended up hurting a lot of religious types, and Raven was even forced to make an out-of-character apology. And Angle was furious. He couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. He went directly to Paul Heyman and demanded that he was cut from the show, or else he'd be suing him. And just like that, the little credibility that pro wrestling had with Angle had completely disappeared. Kurt Angle was at a crossroads. At the age of 27, he'd already achieved his life goal of winning an Olympic gold medal, and now he was at a total loss as to what to do with his life. It was now 1998, and Angle was thirsty for a new challenge. He turned on his TV one Monday night and he watched an episode of Raw. When I started watching it, I said, "It's crap. I could kick the crap out of any of these guys." Then I would watch it for 5 minutes more. Then it became as addictive as a soap opera. Over the next few months, Angle tuned in to the WWF every week, and it turned him into a fan. Angle loved the drama mixed with the pure athleticism on display, and even the reaction he got after winning at the Olympics couldn't match the roar of the WWF crowd. Angle went to Titan Towers to meet with Vince McMahon, and within an hour he'd signed an 8-year contract with the World Wrestling Federation. McMahon made it clear to Angle that he wanted him to learn the wrestling business inside out. Dory Funk Jr. and Tom Pritchard started training Angle at the end of 1998, and he impressed them immediately. On his podcast, Bruce Pritchard said, "We had a ring in the studio warehouse and Kurt actually started training with my brother Tom. Amateur wrestlers spend their entire lives doing one thing, and that's staying off their back. So it's very unnatural for an amateur wrestler to be able to take a flat back bump. Kurt Angle, after 20 minutes, he was attacking the mat and taking flat back bumps better than a lot of pros I've seen. My brother Tom was training with him at every level. He would go in and they would train in the morning in the ring. Then they would go and they would work out in the gym on more cardio, more weight training, resistance training. Then Kurt wanted to go back into the ring. Now Tom was in shape and Tom was a great trainer and loved to work out, but this was a different level. This was world-class Kurt Angle training, and Tom would be worn out, beat up every single day after spending roughly 8 hours in the ring with Kurt. Next, Angle was sent down to Power Pro Wrestling in Memphis, which was being used as a feeder territory for the WWF at the time. He learned the fundamentals of pro wrestling quicker than anybody else, and the WWF management couldn't wait to test him out in front of a real crowd. They set Angle up for his first major appearance on Heat in early 1999. On the show, Tiger Ali Singh challenged Angle to disrespect the American flag for money. Angle rejected his offer and delivered a series of suplexes to Singh. The crowd went wild for Angle, but Bruce Pritchard saw a big problem. He knew that in the Attitude Era of the WWF, this clean-cut All-American character wasn't going to work. Angle had been cutting nauseating babyface promos during his time in Memphis, and the modern-day WWF fans weren't going to accept such a wholesome character. On an episode of Heat in April 1999, Angle squared off against Brian Christopher. Christopher immediately made a problem for Angle when he turned a suplex into a DDT, causing him to land on his head. After the match, Angle was ready to confront Christopher over the incident, but Al Snow talked him down and kept the men separated. Luckily, this incident didn't get back to Vince McMahon, who was already coming up with heel gimmick ideas for Angle, including the memorable 3 Eyes mantra: intensity, integrity, and intelligence, of course. They filmed vignettes where Angle exuded arrogance as he repeated the mantra and told the audience just why he was better than everyone else. This was all in the lead up to his debut at the Survivor Series in November, where he defeated Shawn Stasiak. During the match, the crowd started a boring chant, but McMahon was determined to get Angle over as a heel, and so McMahon instructed him via the referee in the ring to start goading the crowd, which certainly helped, but it was clear from this match that there was still room for plenty of improvement when it came to Angle's character. Luckily, the indifference from the fans didn't last. Week after week, he cut condescending promos that roiled the crowd up brilliantly, and he backed his words up with an undefeated streak that also went on for weeks, and by the time they got to his hometown of Pittsburgh, he was being booed out the building. At the Royal Rumble in January 2000, his undefeated streak came to an end thanks to Taz, who was making his WWF debut. Losing his winning streak wasn't detrimental to Angle's push. He'd quickly outgrown that storyline, and now it was time for him to start winning championships. Angle won the European title from Val Venis in February and the Intercontinental Championship from Chris Jericho 17 days later at No Way Out. Being a dual champion was a novel concept at the time, and it really gave him something to brag about during his promos. At WrestleMania in April, Angle took part in one of the best matches of the night. It was a 2-fall triple threat match alongside Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. The first fall was for the Intercontinental title and the second for the European title. Benoit pinned Jericho to win the IC title first, and then Jericho pinned Benoit to win the European title. It was a really clever way to get both of the belts off of Angle without him ever being pinned. What followed was a couple of months where they cooled off on Angle's push. At Backlash, he was squashed by the Big Show, and at Judgment Day, he teamed up with Edge and Christian, where they lost to Too Cool in the opening match. Angle's alliance with Edge and Christian provided some genuinely funny backstage segments, and it really proved how versatile Angle was as a performer. He could switch between comedy and intensity in a heartbeat. Angle powered through the field on the way to becoming the King of the Ring in June, and this was the start of his real push into the main event. Vince McMahon had a master plan for Angle, and it was going flawlessly well so far. For his part, Angle had been flawless too. It was already breathtaking to see how quickly he adapted to the world of professional wrestling. He made it look effortless. That was proven even further when he was thrust into a storyline with The Undertaker. Despite some concerns early on about their difference in size and wrestling style, they ended up having a decent match at Fully Loaded in July. Fans at the time will remember Angle hilariously mocking The Undertaker by riding around on a scooter in the weeks before the match. In terms of Angle's early storylines, one of the most memorable was the love triangle between Stephanie McMahon, Triple H and himself. Angle started showing affection towards Stephanie, which eventually caused a rift between herself and Triple H. For his part, Triple H pushed Stephanie away, like the time she caught him teaching Trish Stratus a go-behind backstage. Even Triple H's former girlfriend Chyna got involved, and eventually Commissioner Mick Foley stepped in to try and halt the madness. He set up a no DQ match between the men at Unforgiven. Triple H beat Angle on the night, but in the weeks that followed, Stephanie started to side with Angle. On an episode of Raw, he beat Triple H to become the #1 contender to the WWF Championship. They did a really good job of building the intrigue and the tension between the participants, and that's why it was so disappointing when they just dropped the storyline. But in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter. Kurt Angle beat The Rock at No Mercy in October 2000 to win his first ever World Championship. Kurt Angle literally went from amateur wrestler to WWF main event superstar in a matter of months, and his illustrious career was only just getting started.